Hello, everybody. I know you're
Hello.
all on mute, but we will unmute you shortly. Don't worry. My name's Ali. I think this is everybody. Got a couple of people still connecting to audio. So we'll just wait a little while. This is WaveLength, Netflix's collaboration for a film club, and we're kicking things off with Midnight Sky, which you've all watched, right? Like, raise your hand to say you've watched it, otherwise we are going to be in trouble. Yes, that's what I wanted to hear. Now, as you know from seeing the film, there is plenty to talk about. And there's a lot you might have missed. There's a lot of detail. There's a lot of color. We're going to talk about the way it was shot. We're going to talk about the music. We're going to talk about George Clooney himself being both the director and one of the co-stars. We're going to talk about it all. And I think I'm just going to do that brave thing, I think, of giving a few details about the movie's about. We've got George Clooney, Felicity Jones, David Oyelowo. If you don't know any of the names, just don't worry. Just let me know. I've got the details. I'll spit them out. Not a problem. And if you're not entirely sure of how the film actually worked or scenes and all the rest of it, this is a safe space. No one's here to, feel silly or not know what's going on. We'll all explore the movie together. So it's all going to be fine. Let's kick things off with, I think, what we're all thinking about when it comes to Midnight Sky, which is the ending, right? And I wouldn't normally do this, but it is one of those movies where the ending is what we're all talking about. It's what we're all thinking about. I hope we all agree. And how it leaves you, how you feel as you walk out. So, is anybody feeling brave enough to unmute themselves and maybe have a go at trying to explain the ending as they understood it? Anyone feeling brave? You can put your hand up if you like, or just start talking, whatever you'd like to do.
Hi, I was a bit confused.
Perfect. Well, perhaps I could help your confusion. Anybody else get a sense of not fully understanding the importance of the ending? Put your hand up. I mean, you don't need to fully say, yeah, we've got a couple of people there, good. So we're all on the same boat to a lesser or greater extent. So as we know, the story of Midnight Sky is relatively simple on the surface. You've got this man with a terminal disease, played by George Clooney, who we don't really understand what he has, but he has something that requires transfusion, and he has that transfusion pack that he carries with him, and he's not long for this world. And he has spent his whole life dedicated to astronomy and the stars and seeing where else this whole culture of ours can go after Earth. And he's been so obsessed with it that he's ignored his personal life, his partner, and his daughter that he may or may not realize exists. So we all know that, right? I know I'm telling you how to suck eggs here, but bearing that in mind, we realize in the last scene that this girl, this woman, this pregnant, fully grown woman is actually his daughter. We're all on that wavelength, right?
Yeah.
So the way that is told is interesting because over a series of flashbacks, you learn that George Clooney's character has been pushing away his family, pushing away his partner, all the rest of that. But we also know that there's this daughter, and you know that he has some sort of connection with this image of Felicity Jones. I'm just going to use the actors' names. I hope that's okay. And you discover that the reason why she became an astronaut in the first place was because of him. And so there's that bittersweet swing at the end that he has taken until the very end of his life. It's taken that long for him to realize that he needs to be a good father. And the way he exhibits being a good father is by hallucinating, by imagining young Iris, young Felicity Jones, as his friend, his companion, over this last push from the one Arctic base to the second one, New Haven. So who realized across the film that the young girl was possibly his daughter? Did anybody twig that as they watched it? We got one raise, we got a couple of shakes. So if you look back on the film, there are certain moments where you never hear her speak, obviously, but there are certain moments where they hint at the fact that they might be the same person, that they might be the daughter. And this is done through that lack of speech, but also through the way she's drawing her mother. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And he says, I knew a woman like that once.
Yeah.
Right? So you get a bit of a hint there. Okay, that's interesting. Then she explains her name and she does it through a drawing because he doesn't even know what she sounds like. That's the level of distance between him and his daughter. You also get the one moment she does speak. You remember that? It's in that really thrilling moment when they're in the unit, whatever that's called. Excuse me for not knowing the words. That container. And he starts to drown. And he's trying to get out and grab his stuff and escape. And it's the image of the mother. And then she speaks basically, you know, did you love her, right? But then you go, oh, no, it was a dream. No, it was a dream. So there's that. So there are loads of little clues across the movie that Iris is actually that same girl up there. And if you watch it back, you can see different other moments where they're going, hang on, one moment, wait, huh? So we can dig into the flaws of the movie. And there are problems at times where I'm wondering, hang on, during that sequence, shouldn't he have frozen to death? But I think this movie is aiming for bigger thoughts than that. You have to kind of give it a bit of breathing room. This is a movie where meteor strikes happen, where there are space catastrophes, and you just have to let it be science fiction to an extent. But if we go back to the ending, there is this bittersweet moment of realizing that she's only where she is because of his influence, and that he persevered. He went through the tundra, he went through the snow, he went through the storm to get to her, to get to that base, to give her the information. And of course, this is based on a book. And if you have read the book, it's called a different name. It's called Good Morning Midnight. It's by Lily Brooks Dalton. It's interesting to note that in the book, they actually play chess with each other, but they only learn to play chess with each other once they're communicating from that base. So does that make any more sense? There is an unusual shot at the end when you suddenly realize that after finding all this information and putting it together, this slingshot idea of taking that spaceship and slinging it around the Earth and sending it back to this new colony, that it's only thanks to him that humanity has a chance at all of rebuilding. Would anybody like to add their thoughts on these final moments and that final shot of David Oyelowo and Felicity Jones? Come on, Liz, let's go. I know the button's annoying. There we go.
Yeah, I'm afraid I'm a bit mystified because I found the film really difficult to concentrate on and follow the plot. And so, in fact, and I didn't get the link until quite late, so I missed out on the ending, partly because I got so tired I had to go to bed for a while.
Fair enough.
So I'm a bit mystified, really, about the parts of the film I did watch, but also about the ending. Maybe I have to watch the ending afterwards.
No, I understand. Just
I was sorry to interrupt.
Please.
I was just going to say that I watched the whole of the film, got a bit confused, and some of it is in my mind still. But I will have to see it again to be sure that what the story is about.
Sure. I can give a bit more of Précis if people would like a little bit more of an encapsulation. But in terms of that ending, we're left with a man and a woman going back to a new planet. And you can see that as almost like an Adam and Eve type scenario. So Earth is being rebuilt. So you can look at it from a really big level, that whilst life on the first Earth is ending, we're seeing a new Earth and new possibilities with these two new Adam and Eve type characters who have the beginning of a society to kickstart a new world on the other side. So it is very depressing. I think it's fair enough to say, there's no doubt about it. It is a sad ending, but there's this glimmer of hope. What did you guys think about the two characters played by Kyle Chandler and Damien Bashir, who decides to go back to Earth anyway? How did that make you guys feel?
Very depressed, really.
I would say someone would say they were traitors.
Yeah, that's a fair comment. I watched
the way we look at it anyway, how we saw it on the screen.
How did other people feel about seeing these two people just go home anyway, knowing there's no hope there, but just wanting to go back? It's kind of bizarre, isn't it? You could view them as traitors. You could view them as essentially going, this is where my home is. I just have to go where I'm from. And it's kind of interesting seeing people make that decision. So I think it's quite bold. A more typical Hollywood movie would just give you, hey, we're all going, it's all going to be fine. And it doesn't do that. The other key scene in the movie is when Maya, the young black girl, has an accident outside of the spaceship. What were your reactions to that incident when she realizes I'm in trouble?
Tragic.
Absolutely tragic.
It was actually quite visually appealing. Well, not that she died, of course, but like how the tragedy unfolded itself. It's like
She tried to come out from the ship to ensure the fault, you know,
Yeah.
but she couldn't succeed.
I think it's very bittersweet, and I think it's kind of the movie in a nutshell. It's tragic, i.e. it's the end of planet Earth, but there is that sense of hope because she tried and she made a contribution for the greater good. You've got the satellite backup, which is a humongous thing, the communication. What did you guys think about, you mentioned the visuals, I didn't catch your name, just a voice, but the visuals of the blood, obviously it's very dark.
Yeah.
It
I
was
thought-
strangely beautiful, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was beautiful but horrifying, I would say.
Lumps flying everywhere.
And I did think that the movie is very bold in that way. Again, and I'm not just saying this because it's Netflix here, but most movie studios wouldn't allow a scene that's that pessimistic. It goes, yep, that one spot of blood is enough to indicate that we're in deep trouble. And it had this strange, gorgeous view where you think this is horrifying, but also stunning to look at. Did you think
sorry.
that it was well shot? How did you feel the space stuff worked? Were you in the moment? Were you really attached to the characters then?
Yes, I was, yes.
Talk to me more about that.
I kind of like the zero gravity tunnel, you know, when they go up to space. Well, not the I guess, I don't know where it was, but that was kind of fun to watch, I guess.
For sure.
It put some, like a fun element into being isolated in this vast cosmos. Like, there's no contact with anyone else, but I guess it showed that there is still like funness to space, I guess, even though it's dark and unforgiving, as we see, as we saw with like Maya's case.
I think it's interesting to note how different people on the ship distract themselves and keep themselves entertained. I watched those portions and felt very sympathetic because we're all going through that right now, that sense of isolation, that sense of tiredness and the repetitiveness of it all. You know, seeing a fully grown man doing some sort of visual game, I kind of found it quite sweet. And I love the idea of being able to have a hologram that let you be with your family or be on the stairs outside your house. I found that quite affecting. And wouldn't we all agree that the production design is really beautiful? Like the whole of that spaceship was very beautiful to look at.
I found it very realistic.
You found it realistic?
Yeah.
I
liked-
agree with that. Liz,
I liked the background. It looked like interconnecting neurons or something at one point.
yes, some of the visuals of the cosmos when they're just planting the camera in front of the sky is jaw-dropping. And I found myself thinking I would honestly find it so impossible to fix a radar because I'd be so distracted by everything. And I think it was interesting to have Maya, this being her first walk, because it lets us as the viewer have our first walk with her, which I think was a really good decision. Did it remind anybody else of similar films? Has anybody watched Gravity or Interstellar?
I've watched Gravity. Yeah.
So we've got two people saying it reminded them of Gravity. Would anybody like to jump in to say about kind of how they handle the space kind of thrills, the space drama differently. I would argue that Midnight Sky is a lot slower, and it's more kind of, it's less busy.
It's more realistic, more realistic, because it's something that could happen in the future.
It does feel like it is only, what, 35, 40 years away, because this was set in 2049. And I kind of love it for not setting it too far in the future, that there might be, I don't know, ray guns or Star Wars or whatever. Mm-hmm. It feels like we could almost touch it. It could almost happen. If we head back to Earth and we look at George, what did we think about the opening of the movie? It just starts with this bleak announcement that everyone's going home. Mm-hmm. What did we think about the idea of George Clooney's character just going, you know what, I'm staying here? Did you find yourself bonding with him? What was that like for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, staying on the planet of your birth is quite important.
I mean, he dedicated his life to finding other life in like distant planets, and so of course, even with like everyone else abandoning Earth or whatever, he wasn't just going to sacrifice years and years of his life to go where everyone else went. I think he lived a life very like isolated, so I think he was kind of used to it anyway. I think with the snapshots of his life where he goes into flashbacks, like remembering the past, we know that he's sacrificed a lot for his work, and so his work is more important for him to kind of like stay in touch with than it is going with the other people.
Sure. I think it's interesting that you have, and that's very well said, I think it's interesting that they say everyone's going home, and he says, this is my home.
Yeah.
Because work has been his home for his whole life. And we must all know some people, friends or family, or people that we know in our lives that have given themselves up to work, and they forget about what it is to be human, what it is to be alive, to touch things, to be in the moment. And I think it's interesting to see George Clooney make this movie. You know, let's call it as it is. He's a very rich, very wealthy man that's doing very well. He's George Clooney, right? You know. But
when we saw the first scene, you know, when the space, they said that we have to go in the spacecraft. We thought it was just going to be a normal outer space film. But when it came to George Clooney going in the spacecraft, and all the medicines and blood and whatever disease he had, he was treating himself. And that's when I realised that this has got to be something different than anything else.
Quite right. It's interesting that you say that it is distinctly different, because I've mentioned Gravity and I've mentioned Interstellar, but this movie doesn't give you your star, George Clooney, in the spaceship. I think it's a really bold, interesting decision to take one of the most handsome men in the world, one of the most charming men in the world, and make him a massive grump.
Yeah. I didn't recognize him, I don't think, at the beginning.
I'm glad you said that. I looked at posters for this film ages ago, and I was like, who's that? And I think it's interesting that you're seeing somebody who's won Oscars, who's rich and well off and seemingly has his life totally sorted, is attracted to a film and to a story that is about bigger things, about what it's all about the nature of existence, and about loneliness.
Yeah.
And I love he's not just James Bond with a gun. He's telling stories about difficult topics.
I did admire his dedication when he decided to stay, but I thought it was also tragic, and you know, he'd be so lonely and that sort of thing, you know.
It's interesting, it doesn't see him give up. He just kind of runs out of effort. He's just tired.
Yeah.
but he still perseveres. And there's something about the human spirit that's throughout this movie. People will just carry on. There is an inner strength in all of us. And if it's deciding to go back to the planet because you want to see your family, even if you know it's not a sensible thing to do, you have this perseverance. No one here gives up. And I think there's a real beauty to that throughout the movie. I just feel like visually we need to talk about how it looks. What did we think about the snowstorms? Because George Clooney shot that in Iceland, and it cannot have been a pleasant experience. Were there moments when you thought, is that really snow in his beard?
Was it?
I believe so.
No, it's artificial.
You think?
No, I don't think so.
No, we think it's real.
I think it's a bit of both, is the honest truth of it. Because you have to shoot in an area where you can make it cold, and you cannot shoot that in a studio. It cannot be done. It's that sequence when he's plowing ahead. I mean, it's just so, is he really doing this? Did anybody find themselves not believing what they were seeing? Does that make any sense?
When he went underneath this ice, when the ice breaks down, and he tries to fetch his medicine supply. And that was, I think, it's more like impossible thing, you know, in that cold water to do that.
I absolutely agree with you. That is my number one. Why did it happen that way? Because he's an incredibly fragile person. I have to, in retrospect, look back at him swimming in the sea, in the Arctic Sea, and think of it figuratively. That has to be some sort of dream, because you cannot pull yourself out of, onto an ice floe and then walk however long. And it's interesting that you have up in space 100% reality. Everything up there is actually happening. Blood coming out the suit, mathematics, science, slingshots, going into this dark part of the space world so that they can get home in the right way. Whereas down on Earth is a world of creativity and, his mind's coming up with stuff. But I've got to tell you, I agree with you entirely. That bit in the sea, in the ice, I didn't buy it.
Maybe it could be something like it was a trip to his unconscious somehow. And and the deep, dark depths of depression and that sort of thing,
I like that a lot. And maybe it was a realization that perhaps he'd lost something. He'd lost his equipment, or it had broken. The machine wasn't working anymore. And that's the visualization of that. It is a movie that lets you think those thoughts rather than just have absolute, this is exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
I wonder why he left the ending in such a way that makes you think, what do you expect of the ending?
Yes, it's interesting, isn't it? You've got those two people and they don't speak. Didn't anybody else find that very strange?
They don't speak in their language.
They just didn't talk at all. They've essentially been told, this is it. You're going to this new colony. And they're just, it's a very distinct decision from George Clooney, the director. They're just tapping on their screens. And then eventually one gets up and walks away.
I feel that the character that plays George Clooney wanted a simpler life and didn't want space travel so much.
It taps into the kind of insular side of us that's very, I'm safe when I'm by myself. I'm safe with my books, but I wouldn't actually want to go.
I think the two people at the end not talking and just getting on with it, I think it's a very human reaction to take. I mean, if they dwell upon it, then they'll get obviously emotional, and when it comes to, I don't know, starting up like a new population in a whole different atmosphere, then it's very easy to get overwhelmed. So by not talking and by just doing necessary things, then they're planning for it. They're planning this colossal thing, and
that's very well observed. You've entirely persuaded me. I entirely agree now. Shall we talk a bit about Felicity Jones, that actress? You may or may not realize this, but the script wasn't written for a pregnant character. Felicity Jones happened to be pregnant. Stop me if I'm wrong, anybody. I believe this to be the truth. And they rearranged the script so that her character was pregnant. And that becomes a focus of the space crew. What do we think about her performance? And what do we think about her character? She's a child who's been abandoned, but still perseveres. What do we think about her?
To be a woman.
It's interesting to see that she's totally unfazed by her pregnancy. She's in space, does not mind, doesn't even blink of an eye worry her. Isn't there an element of extreme respect for someone like that?
She was carefree, wasn't she?
She's just eating her food, walking around.
Yeah.
She struck me as being very brave and incredibly intelligent, and just, you worry about your human problems, and she just didn't seem to have them.
Especially pregnant.
Cool.
Yeah.
And I think we do live in a world where we don't see many female characters like that. They're either over-sexualized or they're damsels, you know? And this is just incredibly professional, unfazed by the nature of pregnancy. She's like, yep, fine. And I just really liked her for that. You might have recognized her from being in the movie The Theory of Everything about Stephen Hawking. She's that actress too. But no, I thought she was very good. Should we talk about maybe some of the bits of the film that we didn't like? We've been generally very positive about how we're interpreting the ending. What are the other bits that made you go, I'm not so sure about that?
Just to say that towards the ending, like we nobody knows what. Well, we know what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. I think you might make part number 2 and carry on from there and tell us, you know, what happened to those 3 different groups, like George Clooney and the woman and man going back to Earth, going back home, and those 2 guys who went looking. Did they go looking for George Clooney?
No, they went looking for their own families. They went to be with their families, even though there's like a 0.0% chance they'll find them. They still had this belief.
Yeah.
So what you're saying, if I'm interpreting it correctly, is that it's almost interesting that it stops when it does.
Because, it should have carried on.
Yes, because you kind of want to see them start the new planet.
Yeah.
Or see George Clooney finally say goodbye to living, or whatever.
Yeah.
That's an interesting point. I think it's fair to say that it doesn't give you the satisfaction of seeing our new couple, Adam and Eve, building a new city or starting a town. It doesn't.
It's like unfinished, isn't it? Sorry, it's like unfinished. There is more to it, like you were saying.
Part 2 of it.
Yeah, I think that was definitely a decision, and it's often the kind of decision you can accept more in a book than you can in a film. I think we're so used to happy endings or neat conclusions.
That's right.
In a movie, people get married. Oh, there's a child on the way. Oh, everyone's at a party. This movie is far too grown up for that. And
that's not in real. It's not. Everybody's just the same, is it? It's different. It's like movie as well. Some lives are different. Not everybody is happy ending or getting married, having children. It's nothing like that.
Can I mention?
There are,
but not all the time.
Yeah.
Sorry, Yogesh.
Do you think so? You know, this movie can go into the second phase, means this is the first edition. The second one you will get all the answers you're talking about it. But those 3 people are coming from the new planet K3.
Yeah,
that's right. What, if I'm not wrong, is called K3. and it is completely different atmosphere down there than the Earth, and the people thinks there will be some new life down there. The Earth is completely finished. Either the pollution, either the nuclear war, or whatever it is, that was I suspected, and might be that the second movie is coming out and you will get some of the answer, whether they are going on to the new planet.
I think I don't think we're going to see a second movie. That's my guess. I agree with you entirely that I really want to know what happens next. But if we just touch on what you said about nuclear war, we talked about how the ending just ends and it refuses to give you the happy ending. It also doesn't explicitly explain what happens on Earth.
No.
And that's very notable as well, because essentially the book, the story, the director isn't trying to neatly explain anything. We're all adults. We all know that the world is chaos. We're all trying to make sense of it all the time. This isn't a movie that neatly explains all this stuff. And I love it for going, there was an incident. It involves radiation, which we all know is bad. It shows you those birds. Do you remember that haunting shot where he goes out with a light and you see the birds? And it doesn't gift you, we can blame X, we can blame Y, we can blame whoever. We hear on two different occasions, we didn't do a good job of looking after the planet.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very big idea.
Yeah.
And there are hints at a nuclear war. It's notable that when Felicity Jones, our heroine, is trying to communicate to Earth, she is breaking protocol, breaking the rules by trying to talk to Russia, to India, and to China.
Yeah.
Now, you can join your own dots, but the fact that this spaceship isn't allowed to talk to those countries, nuclear powers, is of note. But at the same time, it doesn't just give it to you on a plate. It makes us complicit in whatever happened. We are part of whatever happened. And it doesn't...
I think after watching this movie, and the little bit suspicious about the ending,
right,
deep down, I think there will be the Sky 2, Midnight Sky 2 are coming within a year or two, definitely.
All right. I look forward to it. I look forward to it.
You will get some of the answer from there.
If you guys are looking for something to watch next, because I know we don't have the whole day, movies I might recommend would be The Martian. Who's seen The Martian?
Yeah, it's an old one. It's an old film.
Well, it came out maybe 5-6 years ago. It stars Matt Damon.
Yeah.
But it's similarly about survival in space. We've got Interstellar, which we've brought up before, and we've got Gravity 2, which really plays with the kind of action spectacle cinema side of things. Interstellar, which also has a bit of Matt Damon, is also about kind of trying to find a new life, and it has even bigger ideas. But it's interesting that this movie doesn't go full blockbuster, Did anybody find it difficult to concentrate on everything that's happening the whole time?
I found it very, very hard. That's why I think I got so tired by the end, I was trying very hard, but I still fell asleep before the end.
It doesn't have every other scene with a big flashy explosion or, a car chase, This is a movie where one of its biggest scenes is a man going into a crashed plane and doing the right thing to a man who doesn't want to live it. I do understand why people have just at times in the middle act can disengage from it. Do you think this movie is maybe a cold film, an emotionless film, maybe?
Yeah, very much.
It seemed quite slow moving at certain points, at least that's how it seemed to me.
Yeah. Because I think most movies like this would make every character very tired.
I think the story is divided in the three three phase. I think this story divided by in three phase, and that's why, you know, all the time the pictures are moving on. Then certainly it goes to the second phase, just like the person who are coming from K3 planet and they had an accident, they carry on their repairs, and then all of a sudden they stopped it, and the third phase started. You know, so that's why this movie is a little bit slow, and some people don't follow continually story.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's well said. I think it's a fair criticism of the film that in the spaceship there are constantly little problems. You know, it's a very clear arc on Earth. He gets from A to B through the snow. We know where he's going. We know what the problem is. Whereas in space, they have to. It feels like they sometimes have to create problems. You know, and you have this. It's almost like two different movies. This slow man coming to terms with his life, and then this kind of slightly more blockbustery movie, which is giving you the action set pieces. And at times, you're spending such a long time in space, you forget about downstairs, and sometimes you're spending so long in Earth, you forget about space.
Although it's a complicated film in outer space and everything, but I don't think anybody we didn't want it to leave it for a bit. No, we kept seeing it right till the end.
I think you need to watch it twice or three times, you know.
I think you might be right.
Yeah, you can't watch it in one go without distraction, you know. It's difficult to follow it.
Particularly these days. Yeah. I'm sad to agree with you, but yes, I do.
Have you seen Alien? Have you seen Alien? Alien.
The first film, Alien, yes.
Yeah. I like those sort of films.
That's a proper horror, that, isn't it? It's interesting. This film doesn't fit into a genre. It's not a horror. It's not a thriller. It's not an adventure movie. It's kind of its own thinky thing. Now, I don't want to use up all of your time. Are there any other thoughts that people are desperate to get out, or questions they might want answered? No obligation, obviously. I'll say this about the music. The composer is a man called, and wait for my French accent, you feel like they're really in space. That's a really difficult task. And the other thing I suppose I'd want to say is, it looks good. The production design, the actual sets are amazing. The music's great, and that CGI is extra good. Are there any other thoughts people would like to chip in that have stuck with them after watching this movie?
The photography, that was brilliant. To photography altogether, it's amazing, honestly.
Yeah.
I thought it was so. I felt sad for Clooney, really. So isolated. It was obvious, and loneliness, and he was imagining the little girl. You know, that was really very obvious.
One of my favorite shots in the film is when you have that perfect, it's called magic hour. Have you heard that phrase before? And it's just at sunset where it's purple. And you have this purple orange glow, and he's holding the hand of his imaginary daughter.
Yeah.
And then when he realizes and comes to terms with the fact that she isn't really there, she's gone.
Yeah.
And I thought that was very affecting, and that was a really good use of the camera. Genuinely, we well up a bit just thinking about it. So yeah, it's a stunning thing. We should compliment the cinematographer, who is called Martin Rue. who is German, and I do not know any of his other work, but he's obviously a bit genius, because if George Clooney's picking him, he means business. Any other thoughts from anybody?
I'd like to say something.
Please.
I think that the snow on his beard was espresso, nothing else.
He's always got his eye on a tie-in. Can I just say something in defense of George and his espresso? I read a few years ago that he does those espresso adverts and gives his pay to charity.
Oh.
That's kind of him.
That's why he does it. Because, as we all know, he doesn't need any money.
No.
So that espresso stuff is apparently for his charitable causes, which made me feel just a tiny bit bad for constantly making coffee gags. But that was a brilliant one. There's no denying it. Let me just check my notes. Yeah, I think we've said what we need to say, unless anybody else wants to jump in.
Could I just say I was a bit anxious that I might not, I might have let the club down or something, not watching it all the way through and not being able to send any comments into you.
No, please no. That was just to give ourselves, we've not met each other before.
Yeah.
We now know what this is going to be like. It's going to be me being a know-it-all, and it's going to be you guys chipping in with your thoughts as and when. And I'm
how
going
many of us are there? Sorry, how many of us are there in the club?
I think right now it's maybe a dozen, maybe 15.
14 of us. 14.
14.
Right.
And I think lots of people are going to watch this back. I think this is going to be made available as a recorded thing. So, yes, can we announce, Will, do you mind, who's on the line? Can we announce what film we want to do next month?
Yeah, I think if you're happy to do the one we discussed, yeah.
Yes, great. Will and I talked about this earlier. So one of my favourite films ever is The Truman Show.
Truman Show.
Has anyone seen it before?
No.
Well, it is my great pleasure to ask you to watch it for this time next month. It's a Jim Carrey movie, right? So it's him off the mask and Liar Liar and all the rest of it. But this one isn't a comedy like that. It's funny, but it's really, really clever. It came out in like 1999, and it plays with the concept of reality TV and the idea of a man who's lived his whole life under a camera's lens. So make sure, we'll give you the details. You watch The Truman Show for next month. You'll have tons to say, because unlike this film about space and the end of the world, I think it might connect a little easier with our lives and what we go through. So again, it's The Truman Show, one of my favorite films, and there are so many different ways to interpret it and discuss it. So let me just say thank you all so much for joining us today. I know there are 1,000 things we could be doing, watching different stuff, maybe Midnight Sky 2, that comes in. So
what's the date of the next meeting, please?
I believe it's the third Thursday of February, which I believe is the 21st as well. Is that right, Will?
Off the top of my head, yes, that sounds right. But Katie and the WaveLength guys will send everything round later this week or early next week with all that information again, and the times and the dates. And
I think it's going to be the 25th.
Third Thursday is the 18th on the calendar. Fourth is the 25th. But I will send out all the information, so don't worry, guys. As soon as I know,
Have it bit more timing to watch movie, please. This time we didn't enough time.
I think the 25th February is the best.
It would personally be good for me too, but we'll talk about it separately and we'll make sure we're all on the same page. And just thank you for watching the movie. I know you wouldn't necessarily have pressed play on this one, and it was great to watch it with you guys.
Yeah. Thank you.
So I think that's all she wrote, if we're all happy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Katie and Will, should I just say goodbye?
Okay.
Bye.
Good night.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks,
Nicole.
everybody. Nicole and Liz and Hasmuk, thank you all for mine. I didn't catch your name. I'll learn your names properly next time.
Yeah.
Okay, bye.
George Clooney.
George Clooney, that's it, George Clooney.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.